Hey guys, so today we've got my first post-lottery 2022 NHL mock draft, and this is only going to be the top 16 picks, so the lottery picks that we already know are determined, and I will be doing the rest of the first round after the playoffs are done. So that'll be my next full first round mock draft when we have the full first round order set, and then I also will do a draft rankings and a full 2 round mock draft. But today we've just got the top 16 picks. These picks are now already determined. So let's start off at number one with the Habs winning the first overall pick, and they're going to be taking Shane Wright. I mean, he's just such a good player, and I mean, I know there's people calling him a bust and stuff, which is just like that's completely absurd. He's such a good player. He got exceptional stats as a 15-year-old, and he has 94 points in 63 games this year with the season done with the Kingston Frontenac for the OHL, 32 goals and 62 assists, along with being the best 200-foot player in the class. He's a very good two-way forward who also possesses an incredible shot. So he can be a potential Selke level player. He's also a 40-50 goal scorer. So he's a guy who can potentially be like the next Bergeron. I think he will be. He has a pretty good chance of being a top 10 player in the NHL. He can maybe even be a top 5 center in the NHL. He's going to be a true number one center. He has a very high floor, and he should um, transition to the NHL very quickly and very easily. And also, he does have very good upside. He also does have a lot of skill. On top of having an amazing shot and a great two-way game, very defensively responsible. And I think people forget that he missed the full year of development last year in the OHL, didn't play at all. And he also had, I think, a leg injury or something as well. So he had a couple of setbacks, which is why he had a slow start to the year this year. But then he started to pick it up, and he's well over a point per game. He's at just about 1.5 points per game, which is still very good production, and it's very impressive considering the fact that he doesn't have great line mates. I mean, his team is not good, and he did miss a full year and had to go through an injury. At number two, we have New Jersey taking Uri Slafkovsky. Slafkovsky isn't. I think this is a bit high for him, and he's not the best player available, but I think he's the best player for New Jersey to take, and they will end up taking him. He's a big power forward, a very big winger, and I think that's what New Jersey needs. They already have Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, and Dawson Mercer down the middle, so they don't need another center, which is why I don't think they will end up taking Cooley. And they already have Dougie Hamilton, Luke Hughes, and Ty Smith, three very good offensive defensemen, so I don't see them taking the Mets either. So I think Slafkovsky is the best guy to take. They need a big winger who can do it all. He's 6'4", a big power forward, and he put up good numbers this year in the league. Got 10 points, 31 games with TPS. So I think he'll be a very strong number one winger playing with Jack Hughes, and they could potentially have a first line of Jack Hughes as that elite number one center playmaker, Alexander Holtz as that 30-40 goal scorer and their elite sniper, and then Slafkovsky as the big power forward, and that could be one of the scariest lines in hockey. At number three, we have Arizona taking Logan Cooley. I think he's the second best player in this class behind Shane Wright, and I think this is pretty likely of how the top three will unfold. He's probably the most skilled player in the class. He put up great numbers, 75 points in 51 games in the USNTDP this past year in the U18 team. I've always been very high on him, and I think he's going to develop into a very good elite number one center. People are saying Cooley over Wright. I still think Wright is the easy number one player in this class, and is just one notch higher than Cooley, but I think Wright will probably end up being somewhere around a 90 to 100 point scorer, along with being one of the best defensive centers in the NHL, a Selke winner. I think Cooley also can put up similar point totals, but is not as complete, even though he is also actually a pretty good two-way 200-foot player as well. But I think Cooley will be a very dynamic and skilled offensive player and a great guy to build around for Arizona. And I mean, Arizona, if they get Bedard next year, they could potentially have Bedard and Cooley as their 1-2 center punch, which could be one of the scariest 1-2 center punches we've ever seen. At number four, we have Seattle taking Simone Nemeth. If Nemeth falls here, they should be ecstatic. They picked Beniers last year. They got a center. So I think they take the best player available right now in Nemeth, an elite defenseman. In my opinion, he's the best defenseman prospect since Rasmus Dahlin. But yeah, he's pretty much on a similar level to Drysdale and Byram coming out of the draft. He should be a number one defenseman. He's a potential Norris caliber defenseman. I don't think Beniers will be a true number one center, but I think he will be a very good number two center. Um, which I think Beniers is more of a high floor, lower ceiling guy, but he's still a great player. I don't think they have their number one center yet, so I think they will be getting that next year with a very strong center class. Even if they don't get Bedard, you still have guys like Adam Fantilli, Leo Carlson, so they could get their number one center with Beniers as their number two. And this year they acquire their elite Norris number one defenseman in Mets. 5, you have Philadelphia taking David Jiricek. Jiricek is my second best defenseman in this class, and he will likely be the number two defenseman. Some people have him higher than Nemeth, but I think Nemeth still clears as the D-man number one in this year's draft. But Jiricek is still an elite defense prospect who should be a first-pair defenseman, and I think this is Nemeth is also actually they're both right shot defensemen. The rest of the defensemen in this class are left shot, so I think there are some teams that do need right shots, so potentially we could see them trying to trade up here to get Nemeth or especially Jiricek. As I think Seattle will probably want to take Nemeth at 4, but Philadelphia was awful defensively last year, and I mean they've got Ryan Ellis, Sanheim's good and young, and Provorov after being very promising, looking like a very elite young defenseman. He's been pretty awful the last few years, not been good defensively, and he's supposed to be an offensive defenseman, but even his offense production hasn't been that impressive as well. But you bring in Jiricek, and especially with Provorov. Go away, you monkey.
I thought you were doing homework.
No.
Okay, well, do you have to start over now?
No.
Will I be in it?
No.
Okay, good.
So I think Jiricek can be a very good first pairing right D for a team that's likely going to head into a rebuild. They are getting old. They have a few solid young pieces, but I think next year they also should probably pick up a forward. But I think they should try to pick up Jiricek here. So I think Jiricek is a great right D to bring in who can be number one or number two defenseman in the NHL. At number 6, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets taking Matthew Savoie. Savoie has dropped quite a bit recently, and I don't really see why. I mean, Craig Button had him ranked 17, and another player not even in the first round who I really like, which we'll get to very soon. But, I mean, Craig Button's ranking was just horrible. Don't listen to him. But yeah, Savoie had 90.65 games to the Winnipeg Ice this year, so similar production to Shane Wright. And he also was kind of in the consideration to get exceptional status as well a few years back for the WHL. Didn't end up getting it, but he's still an elite prospect. And he's a very dynamic, really good offensive player. He's the best skater in this class. It's the big thing. He's a very fast skater. He's an awesome skater. And I think he will probably be, I think, a 80 to 90 point player in the NHL. So I think he's going to be a great offensive producer and a very solid elite center. Maybe he can be kind of a cup level number one center, but I think Kent Johnson is likely going to play the wing. So you'll have Savoie there at center, and then Cole Sillinger. I think he's a winger, and then you have Kent Johnson as your winger there. So I think you have two very dynamic and good high potential offensive players there in Savoie and Kent Johnson. Those are two guys that you can definitely build around. At 7, you have Ottawa taking Joakim Kemell. I think Kemell is a bit overrated. He had a really good start of the year within the league. Same team as Brad Lambert, actually, playing with JYP. He has finished the year with 23 points in 39 games, 15 goals, and 8 assists. But he was a point per game for like the first half of the year. Production really started to fall off at the end, and you can see why he isn't necessarily like a top level goal scorer, but he still has 15 goals. It's because he did get quite lucky this year. He is still a very solid prospect, but I don't think he's necessarily as quite good as his production is. I think Slavkovsky and Lambert are both better than Kamel, but I think Kamel will probably go a bit higher than I do believe he should, and I think Ottawa will pounce on him here. He has the upside to be very good, a top six forward. May not be elite. I think the upside is a bit questionable, but I think he can at least be a solid first line, second line type guy on Ottawa. At 8, we have Detroit taking Brad Lambert. So I just mentioned him before. He did originally play on JYP, but then he moved to the Lahti Pelicans in the Liga. He finished with only 4 points in 25 games this year. He was not doing well with JYP, and I think more so production-wise than actual skill. But he is the most technically gifted player in this class. He's an amazing skater. He's a very fluid skater, and I've seen clips of him just skating through teams. So I think the skill is definitely there, and he has all the tools. He has so many elite tools. He just needs to put it all together. And I think really with Lambert, you're betting on his upside and his potential. I think he has the ability to become the best player in this class. Originally, before, it was kind of Wright at 1, and then Lambert and Savoie were kind of jockeying for that 2 and 3 spot. Lambert has fallen quite a bit, and as I mentioned earlier, Lambert is the guy who Craig Button didn't even have ranked as top 32. And if you look at the points on the surface, sure, it doesn't look like that great, but I do still think he's elite. He has the potential to be one of the best players in this class, an elite offensive producer. He can be a 90-point guy, a very good playmaker who's a great skater and puck handler, and I think he can be a very good winger on Detroit. Yzerman's the best GM in the league, so I think he's going to see the talent in Lambert and pounce on him. And with this pick, I think a lot of people are going to think this is a big reach, and a lot of people are going to think this is a major steal. I fall into the category of thinking this is a major steal, as I've seen him play. He's such a good player. He's a great skater. He can completely deke through teams. I think he will benefit from at least a year or two playing in the league again, getting his production confidence up. But he has all the tools, and once he puts it together and fixes some of his weaknesses, which are fixable, he has the talent to become a premier player in the NHL. And now I'm at Buffalo taking Jonathan Lekkerimäki. He had a very, very good under 18s, and which is why I think he's risen up quite a bit. And I've already had him always in my top 15, but he's put up very good numbers this year. 9 points in 26 games with the Gardens in the SHL. So he's a very good right wing. Not as much as a complete product as other Swedes in this class, but the upside is definitely there to be a very good top 6 forward, if not a first liner, and I could see him as kind of an elite first line right wing. At 10, we have Anaheim taking the biggest riser in this class over the last month or so, and Cutter Gauthier. Cutter Gauthier also played very well in the U18s. He has 65 points in 54 games, including 34 goals in the US NTDP. He's committed to Boston College for next year, and in the U18s this past year, he in the U18s this past year, he put up 9 points in 6 games. He looked really good, and the big thing with him is he is an amazing shooter. He's a sniper, and he has one of the best shots in this class. So I think this could be a great selection here for Anaheim. They have Zegras, who's an elite playmaker. Bringing guys like McTavish, who's more of like a two-way forward. I think he'll be a solid number 2. Shut the fuck up, you ugly. Kill yourself. Kill yourself. You already have Zegras, and you already have... Moving on to number 10, we have the Anaheim Ducks taking Cutter Gauthier. He's the biggest riser in this class. and he's put up 65 points in 54 games this year with the U18s and the USN TDP. He's a center as well. He also plays left wing. And the biggest reason why he's risen is because he put up 9 points in 6 games in the U18. So, like Luke Karamaki, he had a very good U18s with Team USA. And the big thing with him is he is a very good shooter. He's one of the best shooters in this class. He's a pure sniper. He has the potential to be a very solid 30-goal scorer in the NHL. And I think this can be a very good selection that fits the needs of Anaheim. They have Zegras, who's an elite playmaker, going to be a number one center. And McTavish also will probably be kind of number two, a solid second line center, who's kind of more of a 200-foot guy. But I don't think they have a real, true sniper on the team, which I think Gauthier can fill. He can be a guy who has the ability to play with Zegras and can be one of his go-to options in terms of passing the puck to kind of finish off and score the goals. At 11, we have Columbus taking Frank Nazar. He's a pretty underrated player in this class. And this year, Nazar... Moving on to number 11, we have Columbus taking Frank Nazar. He's a pretty underrated player, and he's put up 70 points in 56 games with the USN TDP, so fairly similar numbers to Logan Cooley. And he's just a very good player. Nothing he quite excels in, although he's an elite skater. He's a pretty complete player. But yeah, he's got a lot of versatility as well. The one thing is he is quite undersized. He's only 5'10", which could knock some teams off. But he has the tools to become a very solid top six winger. And Columbus first, they got a center in Savoie, so now I think they get another very good winger, building up their forward group in Frank Nazar. And I think he's a guy who could easily see going into the top 10. At 12, we have San Jose taking Pavel Mintyukov. So he's the third defenseman off the board here, and he's also risen quite a bit. He's a Russian playing in the OHL. So he played with the Saginaw Spirit in the OHL. And Mintyukov put up 62 points in 67 games. So solid numbers as a very talented offensive defenseman. For a team that does need an influx of youth, and so especially on the defensive side, we've got Eklund, Bordelot, Ozzy Weisblatt. So we've got solid, very good forward prospects, but...
I'm sorry, I have to take this down! That hurt!
Okay.
I got you. Go somewhere else if you want it quiet. I'm actually doing something useful. I'm making stupid videos that don't even care about.
Dujan, no one likes you. You have no friends. Moving on to number 12, we have the San Jose Sharks taking Pavel Mintyukov. He's a third defenseman off the board here, and he put up 62 points in 67 games as a defenseman with the Saginaw Spirit of the OHL. So he put up pretty good numbers this year. He's a very good offensive defenseman for a team that does need some more defensive prospects. On the offensive side of things, they've got some very good forward prospects led by William Eklund. They've also got Bordelot, Ozzy Weisblatt. So they've got a lot of very solid forward prospects, but their defense, on D, they have Brent Burns, Erik Karlsson, and Marc-Andre Vlasic, three guys that are aging, washed, on very big contracts. They need some more young defensemen. They have Ryan Merkley, who has the upside. We'll see what he becomes. Struggling to really fit in there in the NHL, but I think he still has good upside. But Mintyukov can be a very solid top four defenseman for San Jose. At 13, we have the Islanders taking Danila Yurov. So he hasn't put up a single point this year in the KHL in 21 games, but he is still a high upside right wing who is still a great scorer, and he only got 2 minutes of playing time a game, so he barely played this year, which is why he couldn't really score a lot in a very diminished role playing in the KHL. He's still very young, though, and I think the Islanders need to score. That's the one thing. They have Pelech and Pulak, Scott Mayfield. They've got a very good defense still, but they're a very defensive team. They need more scoring, and I think Yurov can do that as a great play-driving winger for the Islanders to play with Barzal, and I think he has first-line upside here, and I think will likely drop a bit because of his lack of point production, but I think the Islanders would be very smart to pick him up here, and I think he can develop into a very good player and exactly what the Islanders need. At 14, we have Winnipeg taking Denton Matejchuk. And Matejchuk is one of my favorite players in the class. I think he's the third best defenseman. And you could even argue them being kind of close there with Juracek. So I think Winnipeg picking him up here at 14 is quite a steal. But he's put up very good numbers, 64 points in 65 games with the Moose Jaw Warriors of the WHL. So almost a point per game. I think he is a better prospect than Mintyukov, but I think there's a pretty good chance Mintyukov does go ahead of Matejchuk.
Why do you seem like a good?
Why are you fat? He's a very dynamic offensive defenseman, and I think in this class there are a lot of offensive defensemen. There aren't as many solid defense. There aren't as many defensive defensemen. A lot of the defensemen are more offensively minded, but I think Matejchuk leads that here. He has a very high upside, and I think he can become a very solid first pairing defenseman. And I think Winnipeg could end up taking a guy like Owen Pickering, who's more of a two-way defenseman here at 14. Because they do need help on defense. But I think Matejchuk is still a defenseman. He's still solid defensively. So putting him with Heinola can be, I think these are two guys who could be very solid number 2, number 3 defensemen in the NHL. And at 15 here, we have Vancouver taking Connor. And I think also Matejchuk could even be a number 1 defenseman. I think the upside is unreal there, and he can be such a good offensive defenseman. At 15, we have Vancouver taking Connor Geekie. He's fallen quite a bit. Pretty underwhelming production this year after a strong start with 70 points, 63 games on a pretty stacked Winnipeg Ice team. But overall, I think Geekie is still have very high upside, and he can be an elite first-line center. He's a very big guy. He's 6'4", so I think he's kind of more of a power forward and can be an elite number 1 center. But it is also very likely he ends up topping out as a third-line center. So I think you're taking a risk here with Geekie, and there are a lot of tools to like. He is not a good skater, which is I think one of the biggest knocks on him. But I think if he can improve his skating, he does have tools to become a very, very good big center. But you're also taking a risk as his peak and potential can be questionable at times. And finally, at 16, we have Buffalo taking Gleb Trikazov. So Trikazov is kind of all over the board here, and I think some people can view this as a bit high, but I think he could end up going in the top 15, top 16 for sure. 45 points, 35 games in the MHL this year in Russia. He's a center and a winger, so I think brings flexibility there on Buffalo. And he's a very complete player. He's a very intelligent player, very smart player, as well as brings a very strong 200-foot game. So I think he can be very solid middle six for center or winger for Buffalo. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, remember to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.